It's showtime.
It's the pre-party with J. Cal.
We are professional wrestling.
I'm building an alliance.
You are tuned into
the absolute top of the mountain, the ultimate professional wrestling.
Alliance-wrestling.com What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Preparty, a presentation of Alliance-Wrestling.com. Don't you know it's your number one source for news and information for the National Wrestling Alliance and the United Wrestling Network. My name is J Cal, and for over 52 weeks, we've presented a live episode of the Preparty, which was supposed to be ahead of whatever the National Wrestling Alliance or the United Wrestling Network was set to present on Tuesday nights. However, Tuesday nights have gotten a lot more dull. There hasn't been a whole lot of news and information to talk about. There hasn't been a whole lot of wrestling to talk about in terms of the National Wrestling Alliance, unless you're watching AEW. United Wrestling Network is still presenting live wrestling events. They recently had their show in Memphis. They taped their first episode. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But this is the Pre-Party. My name is J Cal, and let's talk some wrestling, right? Let's talk about the NWA. That's what we do here. Hashtag NWA fam. Now, first and foremost, I want to say thank you. Last week we got a new subscriber in the name of Mad Dog Vashon. Welcome to the party, pal. Nice to have you here. I hope you are tuning in this week and enjoying this show. I see a lot of you guys are here. You guys are so supportive. Wrestling with MMA gave the great announcement. Appreciate you being here, Wrestling with MMA. Lamb is here. Thank you, Lamb. Lamb's on both Twitch and YouTube. Thank you, sir. We got Dave Scooby in the house. We got Terry McDermott. Everyone, welcome, welcome, welcome. I see a couple of people here lurking too. That's totally cool. You're more than welcome to join in the conversation, and you're more than welcome to remain silent. It's up to you. I'm just glad that you're here. Okay, and the topic at hand is what we talk about every week on this show is the National Wrestling Alliance and the United Wrestling Network. For those of you who don't know, Billy Corgan purchased the National Wrestling Alliance back in 2017. And since 2017, they've efforted to produce a product that was reminiscent of the National Wrestling Alliance in yesteryears, i.e. they wanted to be a throwback to the Jim Crockett promotions. And through most of what they've done, they've been pretty successful. Oop. You know what? I just realized I don't have my light on, so give me just a second to put this little bad boy on here, and let's make it a little bit brighter in here so that it's not so dark. Is that a little bit better? Maybe. Traducus is here. Welcome to the show, Traducus. Appreciate you being here. Lamb wanted us to know that Dave Marquez and John Roberts are still stuck in Memphis. Yeah, it's real terrible snowstorms and really everywhere but here in California. So I do appreciate you guys tuning in, because I know it's cold. Some of you guys don't have power right now, so I hope you're all doing okay. You know, real world stuff. It's kind of crazy right now. The winter storm that's hitting is hasn't been seen in quite some time. So I just hope everyone stays safe, stay warm. Hopefully your power gets back on and all that good stuff. How do I sound? I just recently invested in a new microphone. As you can notice, I'm not wearing the headset as usual, so I hope the microphone sounds good. I hope this sounds good to you guys. But I've been working on making some transitions and stuff too, so let's see how this works. So a lot of us were surprised on...
すみません。ではそれに関連して、例えばこのベルトを持って、福岡もそうですけど、これまで名勝負を繰り広げてきた
How about now? Can you guys hear me now? Oh man. You guys give me someone say something in the chat window to let me know that you guys can hear me. Sounds back. Okay, well, I'll try to fix that while we're talking here, but of course. So you gotta laugh, right? You gotta laugh. Okay. Let me try this. All right, tell me if you guys can hear me when I do this. Can you guys still hear me now? Do we have volume right now? I have the best podcast. It's the highest produced podcast in the entire world. Thank you, Wrestling with MMA. Thanks, everyone, for letting me know that I didn't have sound. Okay, so I'm going to start back over. Apologies to everyone who's watching. I got a brand new microphone, and I love this mic. I think I sound better with the mic, but unfortunately, I forgot to put it in the system for the transition. So the chaotic eyeball mic, Matt, you're going to have to message me later about what that is. Okay, so let's get on with this. Apologies. Sunday morning, if you guys are watching NXT, you probably saw that the disturbing images of Eli Drake now with NXT instead of the NWA as LA Knight. It was caught everyone by surprise. I mean, Eli Drake, now LA Knight, even kind of said publicly that he had to kayfabe his move to Florida, telling people that he was actually moving to Atlanta so that he could get to Florida without ruining the surprise of him signing with NXT. And a lot of people, in terms of fans, especially the fans of the National Wrestling Alliance, declare this like the death knell, if you will, for the brand, because Eli Drake, LA Knight, was such an important figure for the National Wrestling Alliance, and it really kind of took the wind out of the sails for a lot of the fans, because they thought that Eli Drake was going to be a big part of the future of NXT. But I want to remind people a few things, and that is, prior to 2019, the National Wrestling Alliance really didn't have much of a roster. In fact, the NWA basically comprised of Nick Aldous, the National Wrestling Alliance World's Heavyweight Champion, the National Treasure, if you will, the Real World's Champion. I mean, essentially, he was the only guy under contract. We saw the maturation of the National Wrestling Alliance grow from the 10 pounds of gold, which was the transitional period from Tim Storm, who was then the world's heavyweight champion, to Nick Aldous. And we saw that transition and the maturation period of the NWA long before there was a NWA Power. And the popularity of the National Wrestling Alliance began to grow based on that period between the NWA and from 10 pounds of gold to NWA Power. Sorry, I got distracted there, guys. And the problem with that is we all got accustomed to something that wasn't actually real. We all thought that, when we watched NWA Power from the first time and we saw this complete roster, this murder's row of promos and wrestling, these great talented men and women, we were under the impression that this was it, like this was a roster, but that actually wasn't true either. Gosh, Dave Scooby, I swear to God you read my mind. From launch, Billy Corgan said that the National Wrestling Alliance was going to have a core roster where they would filter in talent back and forth. Talent would come, talent would leave. This was true to the old territory days. If you go back and watch some of the Jim Crockett promotions or Championship Wrestling from Georgia Championship Wrestling, or Mid-Atlantic Wrestling, back in those days, you had your world's heavyweight champion. You had a lot of staples of the roster, but talent would come and go quite frequently. There was a wrestler some of you might know by the name of Classy Freddie Blassie, who was one of the biggest stars in Los Angeles as a heel. Literally, fans of that era would come to the ringside area and effort to stab him. Like, this is legit. He drew so much heat in Los Angeles that he was hated. He was in blood feuds. But then he'd go to Georgia. He'd go to Atlanta and wrestle for Georgia Championship Wrestling. And he was a beloved babyface there. And it's how they kept the rosters fresh. It's how they kept talent in and out. And then, when Freddie Blassie was done in Atlanta, he would come back to Los Angeles and then was celebrated as a hero, as a babyface, and started that feud with John Tolos, and really took the LA market by storm. But you need to have those breaks, and that's what how the NWA is unique. When Colt Cabana showed up, we all kind of assumed he was part of the show, but he was able to come, do his thing, and leave. We had Ken Anderson come in, do his thing, and leave. We had Scott Steiner briefly for a while come in, do his thing, and leave. And that was always the plan for Billy Corgan. It was always supposed to be this carousel of talent that would come and go. So when the NWA lost guys like Eddie Kingston and Ricky Starks, people didn't really think a whole lot of it because the NWA was, in the pandemic pause. But that was always the plan. Eddie Kingston wasn't even under contract throughout the entire run of NWA Power. He was without a contract. He had a handshake agreement, and I'm not saying that he didn't benefit from his time in the NWA, because obviously, had it not been for this time with the NWA, that national spotlight, he might not have ever gotten an opportunity to showcase himself in AEW. The same thing could be said for Ricky Starks and even Zicky Dice. All of these talents benefited from their time with the NWA, but didn't get to that next level without spending their time in the NWA, but they weren't under these long-term contracts. We know for a fact that Thunder Rosa is signed through 2021. We recently heard at the end of 2020 that Nick Aldous would be re-signed. But over the last 12 months, we had heard about, James Storm without a contract. We heard about Royce Isaac asking for his release. We knew that a lot of the talents, Tasha Steeles was without a contract. We know that Marty Bell and Allison Kay all of their contracts were allowed to expire with perfectly good expectations and reasons, because the NWA wasn't even running live events. And a lot of people, again, are exclaiming that the NWA is dead because, they're not running shows, they're losing all the talent. But I don't think that that's far off from the plan. As my friend over here, Dave Scooby, said, the NWA is an idea, not a single person. Change is good. Glad for Eli getting another shot in the WWE. I would even take it a step further in saying that the biggest star for the National Wrestling Alliance, the biggest name in the NWA, is not Nick Aldous. It's the 10 pounds of gold. It's the grandfather of professional wrestling. And if it wasn't for the NWA, if it wasn't for that 10 pounds of gold, there might not be a lot of the wrestling promotions you see today. So, yes, I'm disappointed that we never got Eli Drake versus Nick Aldous, because I felt that that's what the whole entire first season of NWA Power was building towards. And even though it didn't come to fruition, even though it didn't actually happen, I really felt like that's what they were building towards. But like I said, from launch, Billy Corgan always said that there would be a revolving window of talent. And, everything that they did to set Power up is still in play. And that's where I think a lot of people are just maybe ignorant. Because if you're proclaiming the National Wrestling Alliance dead right now, then you don't really know the history of the brand, and you don't know how Power happened. And maybe you don't know about pro wrestling. Maybe you should find something else to be entertained by, because by using talent that was not under contract, they were able to keep not only the roster fresh, but it allowed them to have this infinite supply of fresh faces. And, yes, Eli Drake signing with NXT is a blow to NWA Power, because, again, I think long-term plans were going to be him with the 10 pounds of gold. But there's going to be talent coming in and out. They might not be James Storm. They might not be Eli Drake. Hell, they might be better than these guys. And I mean, if nothing else happens right now, if nothing else changes, if nobody else gets signed, that core roster of the NWA still looks like Nick Aldous with the 10 pounds of gold. And for as critical as I've been of Nick Aldous, he's an amazing talent, great promos, really solid in-ring work, and I think he does a great job of representing the tradition and history and legacy of the National Wrestling Alliance. You still have Elijah Burke, your television champion, probably the best promo in the NWA right now. Sorry, Nick. And his potential is hasn't even been tapped yet. He's had one match winning the NWA television title, one singles match in the NWA. Who knows what more he's got in the tank and what's in store for him. Then you've got Trevor Murdoch, former multi-time WWE Tag Team Champion, finally winning his first singles title with the National Wrestling Alliance. What stories can be told with him? You've got Aaron Stevens and JR Kratos, and I'll admit that I'm not a fan of that pairing. I'm not a fan of the way they got the tag titles, but I am a fan of Kratos' work in the ring, and I think Aaron Stevens is brilliant. So, again, there's all this positive stuff still there. And then you could assume, and this is an assumption, along with Thunder Rosa, that Serena Deep will be there to defend the NWA Women's World Championship. World's Women's Championship. But then there's also names like Thomas Latimer, Camille, to go along with Aldous and Rosa. And then I would also assume that guys like Tim Storm, Crimson, and Jax Dane would all likely return as well. And, I mean, by them returning, by bringing these talents back as is, I mean, that's still a pretty solid roster, guys. These guys aren't... they aren't slobs. These aren't the worst wrestlers in the world. I mean, these are pretty good talents. And then there's a whole bevy of talent available. We're talking the guys from Game Changer Wrestling, guys from Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, guys from SWE Fury. There are so many guys available that are out there that are not under contract that the show could really be anything. And that's the thing. NWA Power... it's not going to be the same NWA Power we had a year ago. It can't be. Too much time has changed. Too many things have changed. Too much time has passed. 2019 is 2 years ago, and for a show that had basically a 3 to 4 month series of tapings. I mean, they taped October, they taped November. No, excuse me. They taped October. They taped December. They taped January. The run of the show literally was from October to March 2020, and we're still talking about it because that's how good it was. And there's the formula for this to work is still there, guys. It is still there. So, again, I don't think we need to worry too much about it. I don't think that the NWA is going to be crushed by the loss of Eli Drake. Don't get me wrong. Amazing talent. NXT really scored a big one with LA Knight, but I don't think it's the death knell by far for the NWA. And again, if I'm Billy Corgan and I'm going to close the National Wrestling Alliance and I'm going to shut down everything, I wouldn't have paid Nick Aldous all the money Nick Aldous got paid to close down the brand. It's a true story. Okay, so sorry, I didn't mean to jump on that tirade there, guys, but I wanted to go through that. Now let me read some of your comments. United Wrestling Network Primetime Live wrestlers can be contenders for Nick Aldous and Serena Deeb's NWA title. Absolutely. Now Nick Aldous has said that they kind of need to stand on their own at this point, and I don't disagree with that. We don't need to call somebody a United Wrestling Network talent to showcase them in the NWA. If Watts ends up as a member of the National Wrestling Alliance, that's great for Watts. It doesn't really impact his time with United Wrestling Network or Primetime Live or anything like that. So if CC Chanel ends up on the NWA, Heather Monroe ends up in the NWA, it doesn't really impact that program. It doesn't impact, pardon the pun, what Hollywood's doing, what Primetime Live is doing, or anything else. Tradakis even brings up that ECW had this revolving roster. it's actually really common in the past. You have to remember, McMahon changed things so much by locking people up to long-term contracts. And that was kind of like, back then, it wasn't a big deal until Ted Turner did the same thing to McMahon with the whole, all the AOL Time Warner deals that they signed, and guys like, Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair and Kevin Nash and Macho Man and Scott Hall. Those guys getting these ridiculous deals with Time Warner to keep them from staying with the WWE or going to WCW. It really changed the sport significantly. You have to remember, back in the 80s, yes, guys were under contract, but it wasn't strange to see one talent, wrestling in the WWE this week and then next week wrestling in Mid-South, or wrestling, in Hollywood, or wrestling in, Florida or the Mid-Atlantic, wherever. It was actually pretty regular. Lamb says that he's happy for Drake. He just hopes his second run will not be as bad as EC3's second run in NXT. Yeah, the thing about it too is I don't think, let me try that again. I really do think that the NWA had something special with Eli Drake, and I think the WWE knows that. I think the WWE, just the way that they introduced him and they made it into a big deal, I think that really does set up, I really think it makes the fan base sit up and notice. It makes them pay attention. And if you're only going to use Eli Drake like they did previously, which was not even on air, you wouldn't do that. They brought him in talking a big game, doing a big thing, because their plan is that he's going to be a big deal for them. And, they have to. They're restocking the roster. And remember, not that this is a pro WWE podcast or anything, but every WrestleMania, there's turnover. The roster for the WWE is going to look different after WrestleMania. I guarantee it. You're going to see call-ups from NXT, filling in spots for talent that's overpriced and under-deliver. Guys that they're just not using the right way, or they don't have storylines for. So you'll see a rollover in talent after WrestleMania. You mark my words, it happens every year. So I won't be too upset about that. Trideca says he hopes Sal Renaro, I'm sure, is still with the NWA. Not to sound like a jerk or anything, but it's not like he's got a lot of offers from some of the bigger companies. I hope they still use a lot of the same talent they had access to. I hope, C.W. Anderson retired right when the pandemic hit, and he recently announced he's out of retirement. So I hope they bring C.W. Anderson back. I hope they bring back Matt Cross as well. There's a lot of good names that they could bring into that show. So we'll see. Willie Bowen says that WWE is not the pinnacle of pro wrestling, and I agree. I think especially, when we talk about, I recently did the Alliance Blog podcast where I talked about, how AEW is really kind of radically changing things by doing things that the way they used to be done, if that makes sense. So I don't think that the WWE is the end-all be-all, and I really think you're seeing this new level of competition with AEW, and it's the fact that it's partnering with New Japan, kind of like what WCW did. It's partnering with smaller promotions like when WCW started using talents from ECW. So, yeah, I think that WWE still has a stranglehold of the market. They just got paid $1 billion from the NBC Universal company to air its network on Peacock. So I really do believe that they're not the end-all be-all, but they certainly have a lot of power. Trideca says the NWA has been through a lot worse. It has. We had a guy throw the belt down and totally discredit the NWA. That time in '93 really could have put the NWA out of business, and somehow, like the Phoenix, the mythological beast, it rose from the ashes. Kind of like this thing right here. It rose from the ashes. So I wouldn't be surprised to see, again, that formula is still in place. When the NWA returns to TV or YouTube or whatever avenue it decides to go, that formula is still there. They still have that core audience. They still have those titles that have meaning. They have a history and lineage, and they just need to plug in the missing pieces. And I don't think I don't think that it's going to be too hard to get people to jump right back into it. Of course, those are my thoughts. Terry McDermott, Big Tech says Trevor may be showing up in SWE Fury. He has every right to. I mean, he's not under an exclusive contract, and being a part of SWE Fury really doesn't impact the NWA and vice versa. Crimson, Jack Stane, Tim Storm, all have worked SWE Fury, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see more SWE Fury guys show up in NWA. I mean, Jazz is in SWE Fury. Her husband, Rodney Bernard, Big Red Dog, he's there. Charlie Haas is there. A lot of those guys would make great additions to the NWA roster if they choose to do that. Matt Vermillion says the difference back then, wrestlers left companies to come to Crockett, and things have switched. And Matt, you are correct. Things definitely have switched, but keep in mind too, right? So there is an infinite amount of independent wrestling talent. You know, in my backyard alone, I'm in between Los Angeles and San Diego, where I live in California. And in San Diego, you have Level Up Pro Wrestling. That's B-Boys Wrestling School, and they're starting to put in some really good work, and you're seeing a lot of quality wrestlers maturing out of his school and starting to, you know, unfortunately we're in the middle of a pandemic, so they're not really getting showcased, but a lot of great talent from that school is starting to come up. Then you in Los Angeles, you have the Santino Brothers Wrestling Academy, and this is just California, and stars from Santino Brothers have gone on to do huge things. Like briefly for a while you had Douglas James, who was wrestling for MLW. Currently Brody King was a trainee from Santino Brothers. He's doing big things in Ring of Honor. Tyler Bateman was a part of Santino Brothers. He's in Ring of Honor doing big things. Jake Atlas, NXT, again, was from the Santino Brothers Wrestling Academy. And it seems like there's this infinite wealth of talent that just keeps coming. Slice Boogie's now doing big things for the United Wrestling Network. You've got Ruby Reyes, she's been around for a while, but she's doing things with the United Wrestling Network. There isn't a lack of talent, it's just a lack of opportunity. And the thing is, when you have these multi-conglomerate wrestling promotions working together, AEW working with AAA, working with New Japan, working with TNA, Impact Wrestling, you know, yes, but there's only so many spots for all of this talent, which means that if you're a guy like Chris Dickinson, I mean, right now is your time to shine. Davey Boy Smith Jr. is out here without a contract. It's his time to shine. You know, the Creator Wrestler School, I think they're in New Jersey, the CZW Monster Factory, also in New Jersey. This opportunity to create stars, it's here, guys. And they just need an opportunity to be showcased. So places like Mission Pro Wrestling and all women's wrestling promotion could showcase some of these talents that now that, you know, Lacey Ryan's been signed, Elena Black's been signed, Priscilla Kelly's been signed. So that's 3 more women now who are off the national or on the national radar, but the independent need to be filled, those spots for the independent wrestling. So I really think you're right, Matt. It's not like they can go and get a huge payday. It's not like the stars from the WWE are going to flock to work with Billy Corgan, but there are guys who still have a lot more left in the gas tank. And also that schedule is very attractive. If you could work 3 to 4 days a week but be on TV for months, that's huge. That's a huge victory. And then we talk about guys who are able to, you know, travel back and forth to Japan. When that all comes back to normal, again, being on TV, being on YouTube, on a popular show like NWA Power, having that opportunity to wrestle there and then go elsewhere like Japan or Germany or Mexico or Canada, it gives you that opportunity. So you still have this base in the United States, but while you're growing internationally, it's great for your band or your brand. More. The Sons of Kerry Von Erich would be a great addition to United Wrestling Network and NWA Power. See, Willie, the problem with the Von Erich boys is they're exclusive to MLW, so I don't think you're going to see them anywhere but MLW. I agree, though, if the Crockett Cup were to happen today, that'd be one of the teams that'd be tops my list. Wrestling with MMA says Eli Drake did mocap work for WWE 2K20 video game. You know, back in the day, I mean, Austin Aries, Colt Cabana, Adam Pearce, they all did mocap work for those WWE games back in the day. Matt Vermillion says AEW, he likes them, but their recent world title change felt rushed to me. You know, I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of AEW. I don't really follow it that closely, but I feel like they're trying to do something different. And even though it's very similar to things we've seen in the past, I really think that they're doing some fun stuff. So Matt Vermillion also brings up Eric Redbeard. And yeah, Redbeard, again, he's a guy that has a lot of potential, a lot of talent. If that works with the NWA, great. You know, Nick Aldous said that one of the things they were looking for when it came to wrestlers, came to talent, is they wanted guys that didn't fit the typical indie look. And by that I mean he didn't want the guys who were, skinny and small and doing, very choreographed wrestling. And that's not me taking a shot at the talents, but that's guys like the Young Bucks. And that's what Aldous wants to avoid. He wants guys that, in Billy Corgan's words, he doesn't want people that look like his neighbor next door. He wants guys who fit the bill of pro wrestling, and if that means a throwback to the 80s and guys who are muscle bound, look like superheroes, so be it. Wow, I caught up to all your guys' comments. That's great. Look at me go. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cool things. It's disappointing to hear about Eli Drake, but again, I'm more excited about what's down the pike for the NWA. I'm more excited to see what's up next for the NWA, and I think it's going to be very exciting here over the next few weeks. We're getting closer to springtime. And then, did you guys hear about the Great Muta, Keiji Muto? Did you guys hear about this? He recently won the GHC Championship. That's the Global I always have trouble saying this. Global Honored Crown. And, well, that's it. KG say it.
例えば、このベルトを持って、福岡もそうですけど、これまで名勝負を繰り広げてきた全国いろんな会場でみたいな気持ちもありますか？
なんかね、メールかなんかでね、アメリカでしてくれたんっていうの聞いたね。インパクトってなんだっけ？わかんない。なんかタイトルマッチをアメリカでしてくれなんていう声も少しちょっとちらほら出てきたりとかして、まあせっかくね今日付けでノアさんと契約したわけであって、やっぱり海外アメリカだけじゃない台湾とかね、あの辺も非常に意外と俺自信持ってる国だからね、そういうところでタイトルマッチができたらいいかななんて、そういう意味でも言ったらまあ国際センターね清宮戦、あんまりダメージの来ないように安牌として、こなしていきたいと思います。
すみません、ではそれに関連して例えばこのベルトを持って福岡もそうですけど。
Played it again, so sorry about that.
Still
trying to learn how to do this. But yeah, so here you got Keiji freaking Muto, excuse me. We've got the freaking great Muta who is winning a GHC championship and talking about wanting to defend the title in the United States. Now in the video he said Impact Wrestling, or I think he even said TNA. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he wasn't even sure who called and asked for that title defense. But we do know about 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago? No, it was about a year and a half. What was it? December 2019. There was that potential showdown at the WrestleFest convention. I'm sure I'm not saying that right. The WrestleCade, whatever it was. There was a showdown between Muta. Not Keiji Muto, but Muta and Nick Aldous. And remember, Muta is a former NWA television champion multiple times, a former NWA World's Heavyweight Champion, and, well, currently he's the Global Honored Crown Champion for Pro Wrestling Noah. Is it weird? Is it crazy for me to think that Muta could have been mistaken and not Impact Wrestling, but the NWA requested his title defense? Would it blow your mind if by kicking down the door, the NWA, instead of trying to partner with AEW, instead of trying to partner with Ring of Honor or MLW or any of these promotions, but what if the NWA had its eyes set on working with Pro Wrestling Noah, knowing full well that Nick Aldous once competed in Pro Wrestling Noah? He was a former tag team champion with Samoa Joe. Would that blow your mind? I mean, we talked about this about a year ago. Like, how cool would it be to see Muta and Aldous, even at his advanced age, to see Muta and Aldous for the 10 pounds of gold? I mean, it's almost poetic. It's kind of beautiful, right? Because you have a wrestler who, let's face it, when Muta was the NWA World Champion, WCW was, and the NWA had already kind of broken off. They would come back together later, but there was a brief time there where New Japan Pro Wrestling was the biggest member of the National Wrestling Alliance, and Masahiro Chono won the tournament to become the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion, but would lose that title to the Great Muta. I could see it happening. Now, I see Willie Bowen pointing out that Pro Wrestling Noah has a working relationship with Impact, but if we're all to believe what Tony Khan has said by opening up that that mysterious door, I forgot exactly how he phrased it, the Pandora's box, if you will, New Japan is going to be working with AEW. I mean, it's clear. We know that because we've got the United States champion Jon Moxley set to defend against Kenta in New Japan Pro Wrestling. So we know that AEW is working with New Japan Pro Wrestling. But we also know that New Japan Pro Wrestling is working with Impact because Kenny Omega's been on their show multiple times. Tony Khan's been on the show multiple times. The Good Brothers and Kenny Omega took on Rich Swann, and it was supposed to be Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley, but I think Shelley got replaced by Moose. And then Matt helped me out there. Yes, the Forbidden Door. So I don't know if that Pro Wrestling Noah relationship is intact. Obviously, it appears to me that it's not exclusive because you've got David Finlay and Juice Robinson. Is it Dave Finlay? It's Fit Finlay's kid. I can't remember his name. I'm sorry. Finlay and Robinson are heading to work Impact. So the relationship with Pro Wrestling Noah is, at the very least, not exclusive for Impact. So I would imagine that if Muta did come to the United States, I don't think it would be very difficult for him to work with the NWA. Now, I don't know, guys. I don't have any contracts in hand. I don't have anything exclusive to tell me this. It's just that I feel like this is an opportunity that they can't miss. They can't miss. And let's be honest. Rich Swann versus the Great Muta, Pro Wrestling Noah versus Impact. Yeah, that's going to sell some pay-per-views. But the NWA versus Pro Wrestling Noah, Nick Aldous, the national treasure, the man who's defended that World's Heavyweight Championship on 4 different continents against the Great Muta? Whew. Are you kidding? That would blow me away. I mean, there's at least 15 people in the room right now. Say yes or no. Would you order that pay-per-view? Would you pay $20 for that pay-per-view? Muta versus Aldous? Let's do a scientific survey here. If you would order that match, just leave a comment right now. Say yes or no. I know that I'm streaming a little ahead of what you guys see on the comments section, so I'm kind of waiting on you. But I couldn't believe that you guys wouldn't pay for that. I see Willie Bowen says yes. Lamb says the NWA versus Noah would benefit the NWA. Yes, but Noah not so much. Let's talk about that in a second here, Lamb. Let's talk about that. Dave Scooby says yes. Matt Vermillion says yes. Terry McDermott says yes. So I mean that's like 5 of you guys who are already saying yes, and we've got about 15 people in the room. So maybe yes, maybe no, but five people have said yes so far. So let's just say everyone would. I see what you're saying, Lamb, that you think that maybe that doesn't benefit Pro Wrestling Noah, but let's look at it this way. Let's look at it a little bit differently, right? Pro Wrestling Noah doesn't have a big market share in the United States. They're mostly unknown. If someone's been watching pro wrestling for a while, they're fans of Impact, they might have seen some Pro Wrestling Noah stars show up and not even know that they were Pro Wrestling Noah stars. I'm reading Lamb's comments. I'm sorry, guys. Noah did an amazing job besides New Japan in the pandemic and was bought by $1 million company who also bought DDT and the DDT universe. Wrestling with MMA says I'd give Dr. Stinson's left leg to see Muta versus Aldous. So yeah, he'd pay $20. And that's to my point, Lamb. They just were purchased by a multi-million-dollar company who could be seeing what New Japan's doing with the market share that they're gaining in the United States. Let's be honest. There's the WWE, and then there's AEW, but New Japan Pro Wrestling's not far from that. Remember, but prior to the pandemic, New Japan Pro Wrestling was touring in the United States. Like, they literally had tours all up and down the eastern seaboard, matches in Long Beach, California, matches out in Georgia, matches out in New Jersey, matches out, like I said, on the East Coast. So would it surprise me that somebody like Pro Wrestling Noah, who is owned by an aggressive company who just bought DDT and Pro Wrestling Noah, and could have a way with a very minimal investment to get their talent on a very prominently seen YouTube channel? Like, I get it. The NWA doesn't carry the same weight being on YouTube as, say, AEW has with being on TNT. But you have to also remember, too, that NWA Power Episode 1 was seen by over, like, at this point now, it's been viewed over 500,000 times. Their episodes averaged about 200,000 views. That's unheard of for a promotion the size of the NWA. You look at their numbers versus, like, MLW's, it's not even close when the NWA was running regular content. So it would bring in some views. And to your point, Lamb, yes, Impact would definitely has a larger market share, but it also is trying to compete with AEW, and now you have to compete with New Japan Pro Wrestling to even get your talents in Impact. And how is that going forward, knowing that New Japan talents are appearing on Impact? How does that impact your ability to work with them? Do they even want to continue that relationship? So, I mean, there's a lot of questions to be had here, a lot of discussion to be had here. I don't have the answers, but I'm just saying that I think it'd be really cool to see that happen. And again, the low barrier of entry to work with the NWA, you're giving up 4 days out of a month, and that's like 2 days of TV tapings and a pay-per-view. So 3 to 4 days a month, and you're on TV for months. The whole run of NWA Power was literally September 30th is when they first taped episode 1. September 30th and October 1st. They had their first episode October 8th, 2019, and wrapped up sometime in January with their last taping. They literally taped a total of like 8 days in that 3 month or 4 month window. 3 month window. October, I mean, I guess you count September too. But October, November, January. 3 months of actual days of taping for like 6 days. And that includes pay-per-views. We're talking about 2 days in October, 2 days in November, 2 days in January, and then a pay-per-view in December and a pay-per-view in January. So if you're following the NWA content, you know that literally we're talking about 6 days, 8 days, and these guys were on television for months. It's a very easy thing to do. And if you're a brand like Pro Wrestling Noah, and if you're interested, I don't even know if they're interested. It's my speculation that, you know, if Muta's talking about defending the title in the United States, apparently someone in Pro Wrestling Noah wants a title defended in the United States. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't be talking about it. And Lamb, like you said, as a company, if I want a lot of attention and media attention, I would work with AEW or Impact. Yeah, but you have to be aware that maybe AEW doesn't have time to work with Pro Wrestling Noah, because if they did, well, for two reasons. If they work with Noah, how does that impact their relationship with New Japan Pro Wrestling? And that forbidden door, thank you, Matt, that Tony Khan opened up is bringing talent from New Japan Pro Wrestling to AEW. And if you're AEW, what's the better investment, working with New Japan Pro Wrestling or working with Pro Wrestling Noah? Do you have to choose? Maybe you don't. But if you do, who are you going to choose to work with? Likewise, if Impact is at the same point now, they have an opportunity to work with New Japan Pro Wrestling by sacrificing their relationship with Pro Wrestling Noah, what would you do? And Lamb says, well, MLW is also out there, so it's possible that Muda defends an MLW. Absolutely. And that's the thing. If Muda came to the United States, it's not like he's exclusive to anyone. He could work MLW. He could work Primetime Live. He could work the National Wrestling Alliance. That's the beauty of all this. That's the beauty of pro wrestling. We're living in this dangerous society where there's this borderless pro wrestling. Really, you've got WWE on it up to itself. It's the only one who's not playing right now. You've got Ring of Honor, who used to have a relationship with the NWA. You've got MLW, who has no problem allowing its talents to appear on Primetime Live, specifically Hammerstone. Some talents from MLW are appearing on AEW, like Brian Pillman Jr., because they don't have any clauses in their contracts to keep them from working with AEW. But then you've got Matt Hardy working on Impact with the Party Boys. Is that their name? That can't be it. But you get what I'm saying, right? Like, there's no barrier of entry here. So if I'm Muda with the GHC title and I'm saying, hey, well, I would like to defend in the United States. Yeah, you could defend in MLW. You could defend in the NWA. You could defend on Primetime Live. You could defend in AML. You could defend in Ring of Honor. You could defend, if they're willing to book you, you could go anywhere. And the Private Party. Thank you, guys. And Lamb says, which is still a bigger deal than NWA, even right before the pandemic. I think you mean MLW, and I would challenge you on that one, Lamb. I would challenge you that I don't think MLW is a bigger deal than the NWA pre-pandemic. Now it's different. The Hardy Party. That's funny, Dave. Right now it's different, Lamb. I think MLW has surpassed the NWA, but I don't think that prior to the pandemic, I don't believe that was the case. I don't think so. I would argue with you on that one. But now, yeah, the layoff, the NWA has been stagnant for 9 months. A whole year. They haven't taped a new piece of program in 12 months. And don't bring up Shockwave. That was a Primetime Live thing. If it wasn't for Primetime Live in the United Wrestling Network, that footage never would have been shot. But Lamb, MLW was quicker on its feet. MLW was able to pivot. MLW is now creating content. MLW has these deals with Fubi Sports, and MLW is a bigger deal. They had large distribution on many streaming platforms, and pay-per-view were also good sales. All right, but what were the sales? What was MLW's numbers versus the NWA numbers? And I'm not trying to be glib, but if we're going to argue that, you need to be able to tell me how they were better. Having TV deals, you know what? That doesn't always equate to even money. It doesn't always equate to even a good deal. Just because you're on TV doesn't mean it's a good deal. For years, NWA Anarchy was on television, but Bill Behrens didn't get rich off of that. He basically could pay the bills. So yeah, DAZN, Roku, and Pluto, Fubu Sports. Again, we have to look at the numbers. What are they getting? Because I know based only on YouTube, that the numbers that the NWA were getting were close to 1,200 an episode. Where if you go and look at the numbers for MLW, they weren't as high. Now things have changed quite significantly since the pandemic. And all those numbers, all the TV, all the pay-per-views, everything that MLW. Uh-oh, there we go. Oops. What happened there? Oops. All those numbers do play an important role, Lamb. You're correct, but I think pre-pandemic, I don't know if I agree with that. Tredeca says, my bigger issue is that there was zero advertising and promotion for the match between Aldous and Pillman Jr. And Tredeca, I agree, and I was very critical of the NWA for not promoting that match. I don't know why they didn't. They didn't put any promotion into that match. They didn't put any promotion into Jason Strife, which happened out in Iowa. Was it Iowa? Idaho? One of them. Nebraska. It happened in Nebraska. And I feel like the NWA did itself a disservice to not call that attention to that. Because as the rest of the world sees it, Aldous isn't defending the title. And when we talked about only 5 defenses in the course of 2020, that's disappointing on all aspects. So you would think that they would highlight those matches instead of kind of ignoring them. But I mean, even furthermore, when Primetime Live was featuring a lot of the NWA champions, NWA social media wasn't even really bringing those up. They didn't really highlight the shows except for maybe the title matches. They weren't really, they didn't say, hey, watch Eli Drake take on Watts on Primetime Live. So, I mean, there are a lot of things wrong with the NWA. Do not get me wrong. I'm very critical of that. I have been for a while. But I don't think that those problems will hold the NWA back going forward. I mean, look, until they put pen to paper, until a building is announced, until a venue is announced, until a date and time is announced, we're all just sitting here twiddling our thumbs with the NWA. And to Lamb's point, MLW, yeah, right now, they are killing it. Compared to the NWA, they're killing it. Everyone's killing it because NWA is stagnant, which is a shame and sucks. But again, I don't think this is going to be a long-term problem. I think we're going to start seeing the ball move forward. I think we're in that time now. Nick Aldous said conservatively he thought the spring would be when the NWA would return, and we're not in the spring yet. And there's already little chirps about what's going to come next. So again, I also think they're in a good place too. They have some really talented wrestlers on that show. And we'll see. There needs to be that catalyst, and I see Tredekus just said, I mean, I will say at least stagnant. NWA gave me time to catch up on Catalyst Wrestling, and not to diss Georgia, but does Billy Corgan have any ties to St. Louis or Memphis? Not that I'm aware of. I mean, if anything, Chicago would probably be Billy Corgan's preferred place to run a wrestling event. That was Matt. Sorry, I got you guys. I read it all as one. Matt says, not to diss Georgia, but does Billy Corgan have any ties to St. Louis or Memphis? I don't think so. Speaking of Memphis, the United Wrestling Network just had their first television taping in Memphis, Championship Wrestling from Memphis. And to what Lamb said earlier, Dave Marquez and I can't remember the other guy's name. Well, they're still stuck out there. Dave is still stuck out in Memphis, and hopefully he's coming home soon. But yeah, they're still stuck out there. But they did their first TV taping, and I mean they sold out for their tickets. It's a smaller venue. It's not a huge stadium or huge arena. It's a smaller venue, but they did well. They sold out their general admission. They're already selling tickets for their next taping in March. From what I've heard, the tapings went well. United Wrestling Network is adding more places to present pro wrestling, and this is kind of interesting. The NWA used to be this affiliate, this territory type system, and it kind of feels like that's what Marquez is efforting now that the NWA is a singular promotion. But I mean, Dave recently said that United Wrestling Network, besides San Francisco, which they're going to get back to very, very soon, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, Championship Wrestling from Arizona, Memphis, and now Lake Charles is going to be a place where they do localized United Wrestling Network Hollywood content there. San Francisco is doing that as well. And then you have to think he even mentioned more places in the Midwest, so maybe St. Louis would be next on Dave Marquez's map. I'm not exactly sure about that. And then Chris said the NWA could perhaps work with Championship Wrestling from Memphis, part of the United Wrestling Network. Again, I'm all for it, but I don't think you're going to see the United Wrestling Network working with Championship Wrestling from Memphis or the NWA working with United Wrestling Network at all. Primetime Live was an experiment, and it seemed to work fairly well. We had a lot of good title matches, but as Nick Aldous said, the NWA needs to stand on its own right now. So, well, hey, Chris. Hey, I saw your name, but I didn't put two and two together. Thanks for checking it out, man. I really appreciate you popping in on here. We do this every Tuesday, Chris. We talk about the National Wrestling Alliance. We talk about the United Wrestling Network. And every Tuesday, this is what we do. And some days are a lot more fruitful than others. Of course, with the National Wrestling Alliance being on hiatus for over a year now, it gets a little difficult to come up with topics and things. But every week, every Tuesday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 o'clock Pacific, that's what we like to do. So we appreciate you checking us out. Slide in my DMs. Let me know what you think. Tredeca says it's weird to think United Wrestling Network and WWN Live are the only two active governing bodies in wrestling right now. Everyone outside of those are singular promotions. It's weird for me to think the NWA, for all those years that was a sanctioning body, is no more. Now, there are other sanctioning bodies, Tredeca. There's the AIWF, there's the UWA, but to the extent of what the NWA was, there's nothing even close. And I'm just reading more of your comments. St. Louis has some sweet history in the sport. Absolutely. But that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, guys. And again, you guys always you bring it. You're always fun to talk to. I love the discourse. I love the conversation. That's what we do every week. Chris, if you want to join us next week, please feel free to. This is a presentation of Alliance-Wrestling.com, your number one source for news and information for the National Wrestling Alliance and the United Wrestling Network. You can also listen to the podcast on Spotify, on Amazon Music, or is it Music or Amazon Podcasts, Apple Podcast. Used to be Google Play, but I don't think that's around anymore. Just check out the Alliance blog. You can even say, hey, Alexa, play the Alliance blog, and that'll work sometimes. Also, we do sell merchandise. You can go to the merch store at alliance-wrestling.com and check out the shirts that we have available. We also sell hats and all that fun stuff. Coming up next week, we'll be doing this again. We're supposed to get back to the Thursday night podcast soon, too, with DKM and Kevin, where we're going to do interviews with talents from the United Wrestling Network, the NWA, and sometimes even beyond. So make sure you check that out. As Lamb suggests, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe. If you're on Twitch, give us a follow. We'd appreciate that. And that's going to do it for us. Again, really enjoy the discourse, guys. Really enjoy the conversation. You make my week so great every Tuesday. I am so happy to do this. And I like to leave you with my little quote here from Bruce Lee, which is, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, and what is essential. Until next time, boys and girls, we'll see you at the matches. Good night now.